Welcome back to the CryptoMind Business Cast.
If you feel like the ground beneath the digital economy is just shifting at an impossible speed,
No,
well, you're not wrong.
not at all. It's moving incredibly fast.
We are living through this moment of extraordinary collision.
It really is a collision.
You have this unprecedented technological disruption, the AI boom.
Right.
And it's meeting the slow, grinding machinery of global governance.
And that's the tension. It's where the future of commerce, finance, really everything is being redefined.
It's being defined by lawmakers now, not just engineers.
Exactly. Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everyone. This is the place where we try to take all that noise and hype out of the digital revolution.
And give you the clear, rational analysis you need.
Our mission is, as always, to give you a shortcut to being well-informed on this critical intersection of business, tech, and governance.
Yeah, we sift through the dense source material, the legal drafts, all of it, so you don't have to.
So you don't have to spend your time navigating that complexity.
We are definitely not here to chase fleeting trends or, deliver clickbait.
No.
We're here for the smart, curious listener. The entrepreneurs, the investors, the professionals who want that clear, rational, long-form analysis of these really complex systems.
Mm-hmm.
So today we're breaking down the why and the what matters behind what is probably the most intense regulatory effort the tech world has ever seen.
It really is.
The biggest story for 2025 isn't just about what AI can do, it's about what governments are demanding it must do, or what it must not do.
And that critical thinking is just so essential today. When we analyze the landscape, the single biggest fact that emerges from our sources is this.
What's that?
The speed of AI development, accelerated by things like ChatGPT and all that venture capital.
All that money pouring in.
It's triggered what is basically an emergency coordinated response from governments all over the world. The regulation itself is the earthquake.
Absolutely. While we might usually kick off a deep dive talking about market volatility or big macro moves, and those things are definitely in the background. The sources we have today are just overwhelmingly clear.
The focus is elsewhere.
The most pressing business and geopolitical story right now is this massive global effort to govern artificial intelligence.
And this isn't some slow-moving policy trend. It is a regulatory boom.
A boom. That's a great way to put it. It's forcing every single company that touches AI to rethink its entire structure.
Exactly. I mean, the historic investment and development frenzy has put regulators on high alert everywhere. This is a comprehensive global trend trying to set standards before the tech becomes, completely unmanageable.
Okay, so let's unpack this global response. Where are the major centers of gravity for this governance effort? And how are their approaches, philosophically different?
We can really identify 4 key areas of activity spanning continents.
Okay.
But the first, and I would say the most ambitious and comprehensive, is Europe. Specifically with the groundbreaking EU AI Act, which our sources call the RIA.
The RIA, okay. And across the Atlantic, what's happening here?
In North America, the US has responded, but not with the big law like the EU. It's more about key mechanisms.
Like what?
There's an executive order on AI setting government policy, and then, maybe most importantly for the private sector, the NIST AI Risk Management Framework.
The AI RMF 1.0.
That's the one. And it isn't a law, but it provides the technical methodology for how you deploy AI responsibly. And Canada also has its own effort with ADA, the Artificial Intelligence and Data Act.
So Europe is leading with the law, and the US is leading with frameworks and methodology. What about the rest of the world?
Latin America is showing some really significant foundational activity, and it's often focused on social equity.
That's interesting.
Yeah, Mexico has recommendations that are heavily focused on personal data, human rights, democracy, and crucially, addressing the digital divide for groups like Indigenous peoples and women.
I see.
And Brazil is also moving forward, focusing on setting clear ethical principles. So the governance there is really rooted in social justice.
That theme is already emerging. It's not just about, a computer making a mistake. It's about making sure AI doesn't just deepen the fault lines we already have in society.
Exactly.
So what about the Asia Pacific region?
In APAC, the approach tends to be more sector-specific. Australia, for example, is concentrating on things like generative AI, issuing position statements on how it must be used, or developing frameworks for very specific applications.
Like what?
Like autonomous vehicles. They're tackling one problem at a time rather than trying to create one giant omnibus law.
It's fascinating just how broad the concern is. It's ethics, human rights, social vulnerability, all baked into these regulatory talks. But let's focus in on the RIA, the EU's big one.
It's the most likely to have a global impact.
Right. So what is the core philosophy that's driving this immense new law?
The core philosophy of the RIA is fundamentally a risk-based approach.
A risk-based approach.
And it focuses on what are called ex-ante remedies. This is critical.
Okay, let's slow down and clarify that. Ex-ante versus ex-post. That sounds like a fundamental legal distinction that's going to change how companies have to operate.
It absolutely is. When we talk about ex-ante, we mean prevention.
Before the fact.
Exactly, before the fact.
Yeah.
It's about design, internal controls. The EU is trying to manage risks before the damage occurs.
So it's like a mandatory safety inspection before you drive the car off the lot.
That's a perfect analogy. And mandatory design standards for the car itself. It imposes rigorous requirements on the design, the quality, the training data, the whole environment.
And that's totally different from the traditional ex-post model.
Completely. Ex-post measures like civil liability laws are just designed to compensate for damages after something bad has already happened.
So if an algorithm ruins your credit score, you sue for damages afterwards.
That's the old model. The RIA demands preemptive action. It's trying to balance protecting fundamental rights, and they cite over 20 of them, with the need to, still foster innovation.
A balancing act.
A very delicate one. But the burden is clearly shifted onto the provider to prove safety first.
So the goal isn't just to punish bad actors later, but to fundamentally shift the corporate culture, to make sure the tech is built responsibly from the ground up.
That's it.
And this takes us right into the idea of risk management, which seems central to everything, especially that US NIST framework. How do these frameworks even define risk?
It's actually pretty simple. Our sources define risk as the combination of two things: the probability of a harmful event and the severity of that harm.
Probability and severity.
The more likely and the more severe, the higher the risk and the stricter the rules. And this is all systematized through a 4-stage cycle.
Okay, let's unpack that process. It's map, measure, manage, and govern. This sounds like an operational mandate for companies. Let's start with map.
MAP just means recognizing the context where the AI will operate
Okay.
and identifying all the related risks. This requires some pretty intense analysis before you even think about deployment.
So for example, if you're building an AI for hiring, a high-risk use case.
Right, you have to map the contextual risks. Is there existing bias in that job market? What happens if the system fails? For whom does it fail? It's all about figuring out what could go wrong.
But wait, isn't defining risk a deeply subjective process? I mean, especially for something like predicting job performance. How do you account for human bias in the mapping stage itself?
That is the core challenge, and the framework demands that this can't happen in a vacuum. You need diverse, interdisciplinary teams, not just engineers, to look at the context. But even once you identify the risks, you then have to measure them.
How on earth do you measure something like bias or a violation of dignity?
So measure involves assessing and tracking those risks with relevant metrics. And it goes beyond just simple numbers. You might quantify a failure rate, sure, but you also have to assess the impact of that failure on fundamental rights.
Give me an example.
If hiring AI scores male candidates 20% higher than equally qualified female candidates, that's a measurable bias risk. You have to ask, how likely is this to happen? And how severe is the long-term impact on women's employment?
Right. You're developing metrics for qualitative harm.
Yes. And once those risks are measured, we move into manage.
The action phase.
Correct. You manage by prioritizing the risks and then acting on them. This is where you deploy the actual safeguards.
So if your data shows a systemic gender bias,
The manage phase requires you to fix it, filter the data, reweight it, or maybe implement mandatory human review points. It's about deploying concrete solutions.
and finally, govern. This sounds like the bureaucratic part, but maybe the most important.
Govern is the overarching requirement. It's about cultivating a culture of risk management throughout the whole organization. This isn't a one-off check. It's a continuous cyclical process.
So documentation, internal audits.
Comprehensive documentation. Designated oversight personnel. For a high-risk provider, it means a documented quality management system and keeping logs for years. The implication is huge. Documentation and internal control are now as critical to the business model as the code itself.
Wow, this sounds like a massive undertaking. And it's clear the toughest rules are for what the EU calls high-risk systems, or SAR. Let's dig into that. What's the biggest compliance headache for a company that lands in that category?
I'd say the biggest trap is just the sheer weight of the ongoing compliance burden. The legal threshold for being classified as high risk is very specific. The system has to pose a significant detrimental effect on health, safety, and fundamental rights of EU citizens.
So it's a high bar.
It's an intentionally high bar, mainly to avoid restricting international trade too much. But if you cross that line, the cost of entry is immense.
So what kinds of applications actually cross that threshold? Seems like it's all focused on areas where AI can fundamentally change someone's life, their job, their health, their freedom.
That is the perfect way to sum it up. Annex 3 of the Act gives a detailed list. We can group the examples from our sources into about 5 major categories.
Let's go through them.
First, the medical field. This one is pretty intuitive. It includes AI systems used in things like robotic surgery or as components of medical devices, like diagnostic software.
So the risk is direct physical harm.
Or a fatal misdiagnosis from an algorithmic error or a bias.
So give me a hypothetical.
Imagine an AI that analyzes mammograms. If its training data was mostly from one ethnic group, and it consistently fails to flag anomalies in scans from another ethnic group.
That's a life or death failure.
Exactly. That system has to adhere to all the SAR requirements.
Yeah.
Rigorous data checks, mandatory human oversight, and a 10-year log of every decision.
That makes the health and safety connection obvious. What about professional life?
That's the second major category. Public sector and employment. This is a big one. It includes AI used in recruitment, personnel selection, and management decisions that impact promotions or termination.
So why is a recruitment algorithm high risk? It just sounds like efficiency.
Because the danger is systemic discrimination on a massive scale. An algorithm trained on historical hiring data might just learn decades of bias against women or minorities and then perpetuate those patterns automatically. If an AI becomes the gatekeeper to a job, it can directly violate fundamental rights.
And that connects directly back to what you said about the recommendations in Mexico that focus on non-discrimination.
It's a clear philosophical thread.
Okay, third category, law enforcement and justice. That sounds like a minefield.
It is. Our sources focus heavily on predictive policing techniques.
So systems used to estimate crime risk or recidivism.
Exactly, especially when it's based on profiling. This covers both predicting where a crime might happen and who is likely to be involved.
I get the potential for harm, but police already use human judgment to decide where to patrol. How is an AI so much riskier?
It's about 2 things: scale and obfuscation.
Yeah.
If one human officer is biased, it affects a few people. If a national AI system is biased, it can target entire communities exponentially. And second, it can violate the presumption of innocence by flagging people based on associations, not actions.
So it's under heavy scrutiny.
Immense scrutiny. And on top of all that, these systems still have to comply with the GDPR.
Right, the General Data Protection Regulation.
So if you're collecting vast amounts of personal data for profiling, you're facing huge restrictions from GDPR in addition to the RIA compliance.
It's a double whammy. Okay, fourth category, financial services.
Specifically, systems used for assessing someone's creditworthiness or credit score.
Why that specifically?
Because the outcome directly impacts their socioeconomic status. A bad score from an algorithm can block you from getting a house, a loan, even insurance. It's another gatekeeper to opportunity.
So is all financial AI high risk?
No, and this shows the nuance. Systems used for, say, internal fraud detection or anti-money laundering compliance are generally excluded from high-risk status.
Because the direct harm to an individual's rights is lower.
Much lower. That distinction is vital for any fintech company to understand.
And the final category was critical infrastructure.
Yes, this is systems used as safety components in things like power grids, water treatment plants, or air traffic control.
The stakes there are obvious.
An AI failure there could cause systemic collapse or direct harm to public safety. It demands the absolute highest level of scrutiny.
So that covers the systems that are highly regulated.
Yeah.
But the rules also explicitly prohibit certain things entirely.
Yes, they're deemed fundamentally unacceptable no matter what. The prohibitions are all about manipulation and exploitation.
Okay, so what's off limits?
First, AI systems that use subliminal techniques to substantially alter human behavior.
Subliminal techniques.
Sounds, images, things that are beyond conscious perception but are likely to cause physical or psychological harm. The concern is AI's ability to invisibly modify our decision-making.
That sounds like science fiction, but with hyper-personalization, it's becoming possible.
Precisely. And the second prohibition is just as critical. Systems that exploit the vulnerabilities of specific groups.
Such as?
Age, disability, socioeconomic status. If an AI targets elderly citizens with memory issues to push them towards a bad financial product, that's prohibited.
I see. And there's also a specific ban related to monitoring people in certain settings, right?
Yes, a big one. AI systems used to infer emotions in the workplace and in educational settings are banned.
Why that?
It's driven by deep skepticism about both reliability and ethics. Emotion detection tech is notoriously unreliable across cultures, and using it where there's a power imbalance like employer over employee is seen as a massive invasion of privacy.
So it addresses not just the objective failure of the tech, but the potential for misuse because it's so unreliable in the first place.
Exactly. It forces developers to recognize the limits of their own models. Which brings us to the systems that are explicitly excluded.
Yeah, what are those?
Notably, systems intended only for military defense or national security purposes.
That seems like a massive loophole.
It's a deliberate exclusion based on national sovereignty. But our sources point out a key contradiction.
Which is?
Military applications often involve things like logistics and data analysis that mirror civil uses. The ethical principles developed for the military, where failure is catastrophic, could actually hold really important lessons for civil regulation.
That's a great point. Why should the standard be lower for civil life?
It's a very good question.
Okay, let's pivot to the practical side. This framework imposes massive obligations on companies. What does compliance actually look like?
The compliance burden is immense. If you provide a high-risk system, you must operate under a documented and updated quality management system. Think of it like ISO standards in manufacturing.
And what's in that quality management system?
It covers everything from design to data. A critical piece is adequate data governance.
Meaning the training data.
The training data, the validation data, all of it. It has to be complete, relevant, and as error-free as possible. And you have to take proactive measures to detect, prevent, and mitigate potential biases.
And this ties right back into GDPR again.
Absolutely. If you're processing sensitive data to train an algorithm, you have to navigate two major regulatory regimes at the same time. You need data scientists who are also legal experts.
So let's talk about the black box problem. Does the EU demand companies reveal their secret source code for transparency?
Transparency is paramount, but it's more of a transparency of experts for experts approach, not full public disclosure.
What does that mean?
It means the high-risk systems have to be designed with enough transparency so that the deployer, like a hospital or an HR department, can understand and correctly use the output.
So the provider has to give them enough information to understand the decisions, even without the code.
Precisely. They have to provide comprehensive technical documentation, information on the system's logic, its limitations. This all links to two concepts, interpretability and explicability.
Let's define those.
Interpretability is about how transparent a model is intrinsically. A simple model is more interpretable. Explicability, on the other hand, is the system's active ability to generate an explanation for its behavior that's adapted to the audience.
And the RIA mandates high explicability for these systems.
Yes. It includes demands for detailed logs of system events, sometimes for up to 10 years, for traceability.
This all suggests the AI isn't really autonomous in these scenarios. Is human oversight a mandatory requirement?
Yes, and it has to be effective by design. That's a crucial mandate. The goal is to ensure humans can intervene, interrupt, or override the system's decisions.
So the human operator has to be competent, trained,
and authorized. The oversight has to be meaningful, not just a symbolic gesture. The AI can't just be a suggestion box that's always followed.
So who checks all this? The scale of enforcement must be daunting.
That falls under the conformity assessment process. It's either a self-assessment by the provider or mandatory checks by a notified body, which is an independent third party.
But what if something goes wrong after it's on the market?
That triggers the post-market surveillance system. The provider has to have a plan to continuously collect and examine data from the AI's use.
So they're always watching for problems.
If a serious incident happens, one that affects a fundamental right or health and safety, they have to immediately notify the authorities. It's a continuous feedback loop.
This entire landscape, it's really a strategic move by the EU to position itself as the global leader in trustworthy AI.
It is.
So let's talk about the Brussels effect. What are the implications for non-EU tech companies?
The Brussels effect is this idea that EU regulations effectively become global standards because of the size of the European market.
So any non-EU company that wants to sell in Europe has to comply.
Exactly. A major U.S. tech giant or an Asian startup, they'll likely have to comply with the RIA's high standards, no matter where they're based.
So if Google designs a credit scoring AI in California, they can't just wall it off. They have to adopt these compliance obligations globally if they want European customers.
It's often just too costly and complex to maintain two separate versions of a core product, so the highest standard, the RIA standard, becomes the default.
And that puts enormous economic pressure on companies worldwide to adapt.
It does. Failure to adapt their internal governance will mean massive barriers to entry and crippling penalties. We're talking tens of millions of euros.
That's the real story here. The cost of compliance, not just the tech itself, is what's going to determine the winners and losers.
Absolutely.
We've spent a lot of time defining this legal framework. But the whole process, mapping, measuring, and managing these qualitative risks like bias or dignity, that requires a deep dive into data that goes way beyond spreadsheets.
That's a perfect transition because the very methodologies you need to make sense of all this regulatory data, the incident reports, the public comments, the feedback, they mirror the challenges of managing any vast qualitative data set to ensure compliance.
Which brings us to another part of our sources, which deals with exactly that process.
The process of deriving insight from complex material, the governance of AI requires breaking complexity into themes.
Okay, let's unpack this methodology. It's known in research as thematic analysis, and it seems directly relevant to how a compliance officer would have to process all this feedback.
Indeed. Thematic analysis is the process of identifying recurring patterns or themes within qualitative data. It's a structured way to make sense of complex, unstructured information, like non-compliance logs.
So, if a tech company is using this on incident reports for their high-risk recruitment AI.
Right. A report might say, I was denied an interview and the feedback was vague. If 10 reports mention that, it might be coded as lack of explicability.
Or if 5 reports note the system favored candidates from one university, that gets coded as training data bias.
Exactly. And that's followed by constant comparison where you refine those codes.
So you compare codes across different reports, merge similar ones, create subthemes.
Yes. Maybe lack of explicability gets refined into insufficient regulatory explanation. It keeps the analysis grounded in the raw data. And what's fascinating is how these themes interact.
Right, they don't exist in a vacuum.
They overlap, they complement, they contrast. An incident might show that the training data bias theme led directly to the lack of explicability theme.
Because the system couldn't explain why it rejected the candidate without exposing its own bias.
And that reveals a much deeper systemic failure than just a technical fault. It highlights the importance of context.
And this brings us back to that idea of the treasure trove, interpreting deviations. If 99% of your data looks fine, but one report shows a significant deviation,
that deviation is crucial. You have to explore it and ask, what does this discord reveal about our model's limitations? It challenges your assumptions, and that's exactly what the governed stage of the risk cycle demands.
And that idea, interpreting deviations, understanding qualitative harm, is critical for upholding the fundamental rights the RIA is all about. Which leads us to the third part of our source material, on the ethical responsibilities of media.
It provides essential guardrails for responsible communication, especially on sensitive topics like algorithmic discrimination or exploiting vulnerable groups, which, as we discussed, are prohibited uses of AI. How so? The media standards we reviewed emphasize the need for measured and sensitive language to avoid sensationalism or alarmism.
That has direct implications for how we even talk about high-risk systems.
Right.
You have to avoid dramatization and focus on respecting the dignity of the person affected.
And this extends to every area where AI meets human vulnerability. When talking about people in migratory processes, for example, the sources stress the imperative to treat them as human beings, not to dehumanize them.
So the connection back to the core philosophy of the EU AI Act is just crystal clear. Protecting fundamental human rights.
Whether you're talking about algorithmic bias against women in hiring or news coverage of a vulnerable group, the ethical constant is promoting equality and avoiding stereotypes.
It's all connected.
The guidance is explicit. Avoid linguistic practices that invisibilize people and actively cover achievements to show a society that's transforming.
So we have this system of rigorous governance, the RIA and NIST, demanding technical rigor.
Yes.
We have a methodological tool, thematic analysis, required to interpret the human impact. And we have an ethical compass from these media guidelines reminding us of the core principles at stake.
The parallel is inescapable. Governing AI is an exercise in establishing ethical boundaries that force technical rigor. Just like journalistic ethics demand fairness and context, the AI Act demands fairness and accountability in high-risk systems.
So what does this all mean? Let's tie this deep dive back to the big picture of technology and money.
The takeaway for you, the professional, the entrepreneur, is this. The biggest story of 2025 isn't just about market fluctuations. It's about the construction of the legal and ethical framework that will define who builds, deploys, and profits from AI.
The EU AI Act, with its risk-based ex-ante approach, isn't just regulating tech, it's regulating risk itself.
And companies that fail to adapt their internal governance, that fail to embrace the documentation and bias mitigation demands, will find themselves locked out of major global markets.
And for you, the learner, the key is to understand that this complexity requires a measured, rational approach. Don't be swayed by the hype. Focus on the underlying structures of risk and governance. That's where the money and the strategic effort will be spent.
This profound shift means that engineers, lawyers, and business strategists all have to communicate and cooperate across these technical, ethical, and legal silos.
That interrelation of themes is where the real value is.
And it's the only way to meet these new global demands.
That is a perfect setup for our next block. We've established the foundation of the AI regulatory framework, the SAR classification, the risk cycle, the role of data governance.
Right.
In the next section, we'll expand on the specific technical obligations this imposes. From cybersecurity requirements to the long-term cost of maintaining a quality management system and continuous human oversight.
Join us right after the break as we continue this deep dive into the future of governance and the unprecedented demands it places on tech providers.
Don't go anywhere.
Welcome to the CryptoMind Business Cast.
You know, it feels like every single day there's some new, totally mind-blowing AI tool that can write or create these amazing images or even code for you. I mean, we are right in the middle of this massive AI boom. It's like a gold rush for the digital age. But, you know, with all this incredible speed, there's also this growing sense of unease. You gotta ask, what are the risks? And who, if anyone, is actually in charge here? All right, let's really get into this, because this quote, it just hits the nail on the head. It's not just about who can build the smartest AI anymore. No, it's a flat-out race for our attention, for our loyalty. And this crazy pace of innovation, it has just completely outrun any attempt to create rules. It's left us in this kind of digital Wild West, where the biggest players are pretty much just making it all up as they go along. So, I mean, that's the big question, right? How do we actually harness all this incredible potential without just letting the risks run completely wild? How do you even begin to build guardrails for this super speeding highway of technology? Well, it turns out one of the world's biggest economic players has decided to step in and try to write the first ever comprehensive rulebook for all of this.
All right, so to get our heads around all of this, here's a quick look at what we're going to cover. First, we'll talk about this Wild West moment we're in. Then we'll dive into Europe's big new rulebook. We'll look at what they call unacceptable risks, the stuff that's just flat out banned, and the rules for high-stakes AI. After that, we'll touch on the transparency rules for the everyday AI you and I use. And finally, we'll explore the huge global ripple effect this whole thing could have.
So, how do you tame the Wild West? Well, the European Union is stepping up to the plate with its landmark AI Act. And trust me, this is a huge deal. It's the world's first major comprehensive law designed specifically to regulate AI. You could say they're trying to be the new sheriff in town.
So what's the core idea behind it all? Honestly, it's actually pretty simple when you break it down. Instead of trying to regulate the technology itself, which is almost impossible, the EU AI Act regulates how it's used. It creates this legal framework that sorts all AI systems into different buckets based on one single question. How much risk does this thing pose to a person's health, their safety, or their fundamental rights? And this really shows you exactly how they're thinking about it. Just picture a risk pyramid. Right at the very top, you've got AI that poses an unacceptable risk. That stuff, it's completely banned, no exceptions. One level down, you've got high-risk AI. It's allowed, but it comes with a whole long list of super strict rules. Then there's limited risk AI, where the main thing is just being transparent about it. And way down at the bottom, you have minimal risk stuff like, say, a spam filter, and that has very few rules at all. Okay, let's start at the very top of that pyramid with the really controversial stuff. We're talking about the AI practices that the EU has decided are just so dangerous to our rights and our society, that they are simply not allowed. Period. End of story. And what's really interesting is just how specific this law gets. For example, it completely bans government-run social scoring systems, the kind that would rank citizens. It also outlaws any AI that uses subliminal tricks to manipulate you into doing something harmful. The law also prohibits any AI designed to exploit the vulnerabilities of, say, children or other specific groups. And this one is crucial. It bans emotion recognition technology in workplaces and schools. Plus, it bans real-time biometric scanning, like face scanning, in public spaces by the police, with just a few very narrow exceptions.
All right, let's move down one level to the next category, high risk. Now, this isn't about banning AI. It's about putting it on a really, really strict watch list. See, these are the kinds of AI systems that are allowed to exist, but they need serious oversight because, well, their decisions can literally change the course of someone's entire life.
I mean, just think about it for a second. We're talking about an AI that could be the deciding factor on whether you get a job or if you're accepted into college, or whether you get that loan you need. It could even be used in the justice system. When the stakes are that high, when a single decision can have such a massive impact on your future, the EU's basically saying, nope, special rules have to apply here.
So what do these rules actually look like in practice? Well, for instance, if an AI is used in hiring, the company has to prove it doesn't just reinforce old biases. If it's used in law enforcement, there has to be real, meaningful human oversight. And the data it's trained on, it's got to be high quality. Basically, for any of these high-risk systems, companies have to do serious risk assessments and be super transparent about how the whole thing works.
Okay, let's move further down the pyramid to the AI that most of us are actually bumping into every single day. For these systems, the main worry isn't some life-altering decision. It's much simpler. It's about deception. And so the core principle is simple too, transparency. You should always, always know when you're dealing with a machine and not a person.
And the perfect example of this? Deepfakes. I'm sure you've seen them. They're those incredibly realistic videos or audio clips that are completely made up by an AI. Now, sure, they can be fun, but they can also be a massive tool for spreading misinformation. And the AI Act has a really clear rule about this.
The rule is dead simple. Disclosure. If you're talking to a chatbot, it has to tell you, hey, I'm a chatbot. If you're looking at a deepfake video or a picture, it has to be clearly labeled as being generated by AI. The whole goal is just to prevent you from being deceived, to make sure you always know what's real and what's not. So right about now, you might be thinking, okay, that's a European law, I live in the US or in Asia or somewhere else, so why should I care? Well, that's where this whole story gets really interesting, because the EU's market is so massive, its rules have a funny way of creating a global ripple effect. Believe it or not, there's actually a name for this phenomenon. It's called the Brussels effect. And the idea is pretty straightforward. Any global company that wants to sell its products or services to the almost 450 million consumers in the European Union, well, it has to follow their rules. Of course, this whole approach isn't without some debate. Some critics are worried that rules this strict could end up stifling innovation. Others think that major players like the US or China might just create their own competing rulebooks, leading to a kind of fractured, messy global internet.
But let's break down why so many companies often just choose to comply anyway. Reason number one, and this is the big one, is market access. If you want to play in one of the world's biggest sandboxes, you gotta play by their rules. Reason two, it's often just easier and cheaper for a company to adopt that high EU standard everywhere, across the board, instead of trying to make different versions for different countries. And finally, there's trust. Complying with a really strict regulation like the AI Act can actually help you build trust with customers all over the world.
And all of this leaves us with one final, really critical question. The race to build AI is absolutely global, but the very first comprehensive rulebook is coming out of Europe. So will the Brussels effect manage to turn the EU's vision for safe and ethical AI into the default global standard? Will it end up shaping this technology for every single one of us, no matter where we live? I guess only time will tell, and the next few years are going to be fascinating to watch.
Welcome to the CryptoMind Business Cast.